If developer times are going to be added to Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, how hard should they be? Some people think that they should only be slightly harder than the Oxide times, while other people think that they should be significantly harder. And then there's other people that just despise the idea of adding the developer times altogether. On top of that, what should the reward for beating all these times even be? A new character? A skin? Nothing at all? Well, let's get into it. What is up, guys? My name is Dashy, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the developer time dilemma in CTR Nitro Fueled. There was a data mine at the start of the Winter GP that mentioned developer times and a new character, which was referred to in the code as Who Am I? This means that, well, the thought is definitely there, and they've kind of started implementing at least the thought of developer times and having a goal to beat them and probably a reward to get from beating them. So, the first topic that I want to talk about specifically, though, is how much harder should these ghosts be in comparison to the Oxide ghosts? I'm going to make a disclaimer right now that this opinion that I have and what I'm going to talk about might not make everybody happy, but it's kind of the honest truth. Before we really get into it, let's take a look at something that was posted on the Crash Bandicoot subreddit that was talking about the dev times. Look at the scores of the comments that praise the idea of harder ghosts and compare them to the ones that kind of dread the idea of them. One particular comment thread that I want to take a look at specifically is this one, where the person basically says that they feel that their reward should be Emperor Velo or Fake Velo, you know, the main boss that you see in the story mode of Nitro Kart. And they also cite that this would give them a reason to go back and play other tracks, such as Dragon Mines. Most people kind of disagreed with this and then went on to say that you shouldn't lock an entire character behind something like world record times. Quick shout out to the fact that dev times aren't world records, by the way. I just want to throw that out there. There's a very big difference between a developer time and a world record time. You can see that with like the Insane Trilogy as well. The developer times are definitely something you can attain. But moving forward, so more people agreeing with this specifically, saying you shouldn't have a reward locked behind something like really hard time trials. We'll get into that later, why I think that's kind of a silly argument. We get to something that's kind of a weird comment, but I mean, is like drawn out and weird that this dude's comment is, he's saying some stuff that's like actually relevant. So, I mean, here we are. He's basically talking about how the Oxide ghosts aren't nearly as hard as people make them out to be. All you really have to do is hold fire, or not even, and you can still just beat them, and it's really dumb that people are complaining and saying that the Oxide ghosts are too hard, and to have something even harder just seems completely out there. Again, the way he worded this could have probably been a lot better, but there's a little bit of truth to what he's talking about. So I guess from there, we're going to start talking about how I would word things for one, and how I would explain them and show them in a way that might make a little bit more sense and come off a little bit less of a get better at the game, haha, kind of thing. Though at the bottom line, that's really kind of what it is. So personally, I don't think it's really a secret that a lot of the Oxide times are a joke. It's kind of nice, I guess I could say, that I'm doing a series alongside this where I go over how to beat the Oxide times and stuff like that on a variety of courses. And there is yet to be a course that I've uploaded that I was basically just barely beating the Oxide ghost. And I've even done the dreaded Dragon Mines episode, which, I mean, I showed you that you can go around the loop several times and still be able to beat the Oxide ghost. Now, to preface this, I've made this table that shows my personal best times and then compares them to the Tropy and the Oxide times, and then it shows the difference between those times and my personal best. The link to this table is going to be in the description. Now, some people will look at this and they're going to say, okay, so they're easy for you, so what? And what I'd like to kind of say is that I only really consider myself to be above average. I appreciate the respect that some people give me as a top level player, but I don't even play as speed. Even in the realms of acceleration, I've only held 3 time trial world records: Tiger Temple, Hyperspaceway, and Gingerbread Joyride. And since then, people have already beaten those times, so I'm not even a world record holder for acceleration on those courses. So what I'm getting at is that none of my times are impossible to beat, especially if you play as Speed, because it's no secret that Speed is pretty much the best class in the game when it comes to time trialing, or really anything, and you can easily cut upwards of 5 to 10 seconds off of all of my times just by picking a better class and being better with that class. You can go ahead and look at Crash Team ranking if you really want to do this with world record times instead of my times personally. Now, what you're going to see is there's multiple tracks in this table where the Oxide Ghosts are over a whole minute slower than my personal best. This means that, you could literally sit still for an entire minute and still be able to beat these ghosts. Thunderstruck being the worst offender, but Hot Air Skyway is also really bad as well. On almost every single track, Oxide ends up losing fire or he hits a wall. Now on some, he won't even take all of the shortcuts, like Blizzard Bluff and Dragon Mines. There's even some tracks where you can even overlap the Oxide Ghosts entirely just by holding fire, basically. Thunderstruck is probably the best example I can think of for this, and I'm probably going to have a time trial playing of that in the background during this section. While this time definitely shouldn't be impossible, or world record level, I think hold fire for most of the track is just too low of a barrier to entry. I shouldn't be able to beat half of these ghosts by over 20 seconds, and I really don't feel as though I should be able to overlap any of these ghosts. Again, these are supposed to be something that really shows that you put in the time and effort to get good at this game and beat these times. These should be a prestigious reward, and these ghosts are kind of a joke. Let's be real. When I say literally you only have to hold fire to beat all of these ghosts, I am not joking. There is not a single ghost that especially if you play Speed, that you will not be able to beat if you just hit the first boost pad on the track and then hold that fire and never lose Sacred Fire the entire run. Even if your lines are absolutely awful, you will still beat these ghosts. However, one thing that I do kind of want to add though is you can see in the bonus tracks section that they really did step up their game for these times. They actually do pose quite a bit of a challenge. I remember when I first saw the Oxide time for Gingerbread Joyride, I actually didn't even think that it would be possible for a turning character to get the Oxide time, or if they could, it would be just barely. Of course, people have gotten a lot better over the last few months, and I've been proven wrong, and you can beat the Oxide Ghost on turning by like 7 seconds or so, actually. So, people are definitely really good at pushing the limits of the classes. And again, I do want to just point back to, CT ranking, if you really want to see like the world records of all of the classes and stuff like that, to really kind of see what every class is capable of, and especially at the highest level. And I need to remind you guys that CT ranking does actually have a review system that does show the world records of the courses that aren't using a lap glitch or stuff like that. You actually have to submit video proof and stuff like that. So we even have a better ranking system basically than what is included in the game itself. And of course, if you were to compare my personal times with the world records, which is done actually directly on Crash Team ranking, all of my personal times are ranked at a C at best. So if you really think that my times are absolutely ludicrous and unbeatable or whatever, and would be asking way too much if the dev times would be somewhere in that region, then go ahead and take a look at what actual Speed class is capable of. Now, all this being said, do I feel like Crash Team Ranking's ranking system is basically what we should be going off of for the developer times? No, not really. Do I feel like my personal times are something that we should be going off of for these? No, definitely not really. Personally, I just feel like the next set of ghosts should be able to be beaten by, well, any class that you pick. And I know that personally, my times, some of them are unattainable for somebody that plays a different class, such as turning. I've grinded it to the point where some of them are just out of that realm. And personally, I just don't think it would be right if somebody wants to play a different class or is more comfortable with a different class and is unable to beat these times based solely off of the class that they pick. However, this can lead to some issues where something can seem almost impossible for a class like turning, but will be a complete breeze for speed. The majority of turning world records are around 8 to 12 seconds slower than the speed world records. To pull an example, on Tiny Arena, the world record for speed is a 249, but turning is a 259. which is a whole 10-second difference. Even then though, the Oxide time for Tiny Arena is 3 minutes and 43 seconds. This is a 44-second difference than the turning world record. Tacking on a few seconds to the turning world record should put it at something around like 3 minutes and 5 seconds for a time to beat, which I feel like would be pretty reasonable. I think 3:05 is a pretty reasonable time in general for that class because, well, at least on PS4, that just barely puts you in the top 1,000 of time trial times. And of course, not everybody really time trials that much in the first place. Once you get outside of the top like 500 or so, a lot of the people just don't really grind those times, and if they play online, they could have probably actually beaten that time on multiplayer, but have just never put in the time to time trial and post that time on the time trial boards. I think what it really just comes down to is really, no matter how you look at it, if you want to make these times beatable for every class, you're just going to run into an issue where somebody that's playing speed is probably going to be finding this a little bit easier than somebody that doesn't. But it still ends up being a pretty good barrier to entry if you add a couple seconds onto the turning world record. People that still play as something along the lines of turning or balanced mostly either are new players that barely beat the Tropy times as it is, or they're people that basically just play turning for fun anyways, and are really, really, really good at the game. Like, there's basically no in between, and it's kind of funny. So that kind of concludes the section about how difficult I feel like these Oxide Ghosts are gonna be. Of course, I gotta laugh because I do say that it's not like we should be going off of the Crash Team ranking, grading to kind of figure out what the times are, but really I think we should be going off of kind of where the world record times are for turning, and then just tack on an additional like 5 to 10 seconds maybe. If you look at the actual table that I posted earlier, my personal times when it comes to either Crash Cove or Ruse Tubes are only 6 seconds ahead of the Oxide Ghost. So from there, you can, if you want to make it still beatable by turning class, you don't really have too much room to work with. So really, I think it would probably be smart to add basically a percentage increase of the world record turning time rather than just a flat amount, which still ends up being more of a challenge than the Oxide Ghost itself, while still being beatable and attainable for those playing the weaker classes. And I think that's kind of the ballpark we should be looking at when doing these. In general, what I do just want to say is I just don't think the goal should be somewhere around the lines of just hold fire for most of the track. Again, I don't like the prospect of Oxide losing fire on all of these time trials, and at the very least, all of the dev times should be holding fire the entire time. This should be something where you actually start working on how to make your lines a little bit better and save a little bit more time and learn a little bit better routing. And I know it's gonna hurt some people's feelings, but this includes tracks like Dragon Mines, Oxide Station, like all of the Warp 4 tracks with Blue Fire. This includes those. Those developer times should be able to hold Blue Fire at least for the majority of those tracks, and they don't in the Oxide times. Again, the Oxide Ghosts basically lose fire like as soon as they get it on all of these Blue Fire tracks. The only exception here is on Tiny Temple, really. Feel free to talk about that in the comments below. And like I said, I know this is an opinion that not everybody is really gonna like, but I think it's something that kind of has to be acknowledged. That, I mean, there's supposed to be something that's a challenge and like prestigious for people that are good at the game to show that, hey, you know what, I'm decent at the game. That's just how things tend to be when it comes to a reward system. And I don't feel as though the current Oxide time system is really a good indication of that. Now, the second topic that I want to talk about is something that I mentioned at the start as well, and it's the reward that you should get for beating all of these times. So let's just assume that the only 3 real possibilities are 1, a new character, 2, a new skin, or 3, no reward at all. Some people have stated that they don't want a whole character tied to beating developer times, as it would limit the amount of people that can unlock said character. By extension, some feel the same way about a skin. They feel the reward should simply be bragging rights instead. Personally, I don't really find either of these to be good arguments, but let me elaborate. First and foremost, let's be realistic about characters. Now that engine swap is a thing, characters are really just glorified skins with different voice lines. There's no actual gameplay difference between characters, so it's not like those who unlock a character from beating these times will gain any advantage whatsoever over those that haven't. Second, I feel like quote-unquote keeping a collectible locked behind a difficult challenge is bad because people that want it might not be able to unlock it, which is unfair, end quote, isn't a good argument at all. As it is, we already have things like the champion cart and its accompanying decals, which requires you to be in the top 5% of the champion or Nitro leaderboards for the given Grand Prix. If you don't own the game, didn't have the free time, or otherwise missed a past GP, that decal is no longer obtainable for you. It's essentially a collectible locked behind grinding online races or daily challenges for the better part of a month, while also being time limited. Yet this is accepted among the community. We also already have a character and a skin for that character locked behind time trials, so that wouldn't really be too out there either. Plus, difficult challenges should have an adequate reward in order to incentivize players to actually complete them. It makes more sense to have a collectible locked behind something that's skill-based, because the vast majority of cosmetics in this game require nothing more than grinding, and they don't really reward you more or less for playing well or playing poorly. Again, to kind of go back on what I said, what I have to say might not really make people happy, and it might come off as, well, kind of condescending. But a good example is right after the game came out, whenever most of us, when I say us, I mean like people that speedran the original game or like time trial or whatever, most of us, when we saw people that played Digital N Tropy, we just kind of laughed, because the majority of the people that were really actually good at the game weren't really proud of unlocking Digital N Tropy. It wasn't really that much of a challenge, and the only people that were really proud of being able to unlock it were people that really just kind of just barely scraped by and being able to beat him. Now, this all being said, yeah, improving is great, you know, and it's great to be it's great to feel proud that you actually accomplished something and unlocked something. But the problem is that anybody that was fairly decent at the game didn't have something like this. We didn't have anything that said, wow, good job, you actually did something that was pretty impressive. We just kind of lumped all in together with people that just barely scraped by, beating these Oxide times, while some of us straight out would overlap the Oxide ghosts and run circles around them. You know what I mean? Like, there's so little differentiation between the skill levels, and I feel like that's kind of something that was even hinted at in that Reddit thread from earlier. Like the person that said, wow, maybe if they release these developer times, they'll give me a reason to go back and actually play Dragon Mines again. This is the case for a lot of people, really, where after they beat these Oxide times, there's no real point for them to try to improve any further. And especially this being the case with the leaderboards online being as messed up as they are for like half of the tracks. What's the point of trying to compare yourself to other people when you're under the impression that most of the top times are just literally glitched? I mean, real talk. And the problem, of course, also comes in where, I mean, if you beat those Oxide times and you come into the online, I mean, the people of the online world have kind of died down to the point where, at least for me, when I log in and play online matches, I don't get people that just can't hold fire. I don't get the hold X gamers in my lobbies at all. Like, so if I was a new player and I got dropped into those lobbies, I would be getting straight 8th place every single time. I mean, these people, all 8 of them, they know how to hold fire and what reserves are and stuff like that. If you were, again, a new player and you were dropped into this, there's no way you'd survive. And I feel like that's kind of a problem in that the things that the game actually offers as training tools, I guess you could say, which are the Oxide times and stuff like that, and the hard mode adventure modes and stuff like that, they don't really prep you well for the online world if you want to still enjoy yourself and get better at the game. So having something like a harder developer time with a reward that's attached to it that says, hey, I was able to do this. I was able to actually hold fire on all of these tracks all the way to the end, and my lines were actually pretty good as well. That says more to me than, hey, I got the Oxide Ghost done, and that means that I may or may not know how to U-turn. It's not even a requirement to know how to U-turn to be able to beat these Oxide Ghosts. And another thing that needs to be said is, let's be real, the game has been out for over 6 months. U-turning is still in the game. It's not getting removed. It was intended in the beginning. The only thing is, for whatever reason, none of the Oxide Ghosts do U-turning. I don't know why. But again, there's no way, after 6 months of the game being out and all the players that are higher level doing this out in the open that they're gonna remove it. It's silly to think that that's what's gonna happen. Another example I want to make of this is Nick's cut in Thunderstruck. There was a shortcut that was basically found at the very beginning of the game, like when it was launched. I need to also actually add an addendum. This is called Nyx 2 if you want to look it up. NYXX2. And basically, it's right at the start of the lap, but you can only really do it if you have the fast blue fire that you would get from the first blue fire pad. So you carry it all the way to the beginning of the next lap, and then you can jump basically straight off to the right and you land in the little half pipe section. This cuts off I want to say 5 or 6 or more seconds. And again, this was in the game from the very beginning. But the thing is, all of the other things that were going on with Thunderstruck at the time made it so nobody really cared about Nyx 2. We just did lap skips, or you could just jump off to the right at the beginning, at the very start of the game. So nobody really ever did this, and nobody made it known because, well, there was no real point in it. Well, after they finally fixed the lap skips and stuff like that, and talked about, we've fixed all of these issues because we added a checkpoint system. Well, admittedly, people like me and other time trialers and I guess, other players kind of took this as a challenge. We fixed our game. It shouldn't be broken anymore, is kind of how we looked at it. So, what do? Load up Thunderstruck. This entire first day of this GP, my friend Flyer and I played as a duo in matchmaking, and anytime Thunderstruck came up, we always voted for it, and we'd always just do Nyx 2. Again, this has been in the game since the start, and we said, you know what, it still ain't even fixed. Either it's intended, or we're gonna start doing it and people are gonna start noticing. And lo and behold, as soon as that happened, other people started doing it as well, and that's when it started to get fixed. Same thing applies for U-turning. Again, this is something that isn't unknown. I've had developers that have come to my stream and have talked to me specifically while playing and speedrunning the game. They have seen U-turning. They know that it's a thing. It is not going to be removed. I've ranted on this specific topic for way too long, and I'm sorry that it comes off as kind of annoyed, but I gotta be real with you, I get this question so often, and it just kind of blows my mind that even after 6 months of the game being out and constant patching and repatching of the game, and this isn't removed yet, that people still think that for whatever reason it's going to get removed. It's not. Now, to end that tangent, again, if the dev times come out and they don't do U-turns, I mean, I don't know how to say it. We're basically doomed. They're gonna be barely better than the Oxide times at that point. I mean, they're gonna be better, but not by much. And you look at tracks like, Oxide Station's a really good one. If you have blue fire on that track, you're not gonna hold it if you don't know how to U-turn at all. That entire last section after the blue fire all the way to the start of the next lap, you need to know how to U-turn. Otherwise, you aren't going to be able to salvage the blue fire. And the same thing applies for a majority of the blue fire tracks. So I know this kind of trailed off and probably didn't really seem like it had a very clear ending whatsoever, but I guess here we are. There isn't really too much else that I really want to talk about, and I guess I can try to just sum it up. Basically, I think the difficulty of the developer times, of course, they're set by a developer. They really shouldn't be going off of any specific standard, but in general, I feel like they should be able to be beaten by any class that somebody wants to pick. Secondly, I think it makes sense to make the reward for beating all of these times something like a character or skin or whatever. I personally don't really care because I can't really probably see myself using it personally, but it makes sense to me to be able to have a really good reward for beating all of these times because it would incentivize people to actually, well, do it. So that's going to be the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope I didn't really step on too many people's toes with this because again, I know that really saying a lot of this stuff kind of comes off as condescending in the get good echo chamber that a lot of people have, and I don't really want to impose that, but I do want to basically just say again that, these original challenges that are in the game, they aren't really that challenging to the majority of people that came into this game were already good at it because, it's a remake. People came into this game and were already naturally good at it. There's no surprise there. So I feel like adding an extra level of mastery there should be something that people could be looking for. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and etc. etc. I will see you guys next time. After they beat these Oxide ghosts, what else is there for them to do? I don't know if you can hear this. My dog is whimpering. She is performing the big sleep. She is dreaming right now. I wonder what she's dreaming about. I want to leave this in. This is cute. Summer. Hey. Hey. Sorry, dog. I hate that I had to wake you up, but I need to finish this commentary. Where was I at? I already forgot. Motherfucker.